some good news. Back in 2008, my next guest had an idea. What if, he said, we could educate some of the best and brightest Indigenous students in some of Australia's best schools and give those children both a first-class education and the opportunity to build a peer group of friends that is broader than just their local community. It'd give them then, wouldn't it, a much wider experience of Australian life, at the same time give the classmates in these schools in the capital cities probably a deeper understanding than they ever have of the Indigenous experience. Well, 12 years on, this idea has now become what's known as the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, and each year the foundation supports 400 scholarship students at schools right around the country. In just over a decade, talk about closing the gap in a really practical way. The foundation has managed to educate more than 700 students to achieve in ways so many of them never thought possible without the scholarship. Andrew Penfold's the Executive Director and founder of the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. He joins me now from Sydney. Andrew, I love this story. Every time I tell this story, I don't think I can tell it enough because it's such a game changer. You've been to these communities. I've been to these communities. You see this bright, engaged little kid and you wonder how on earth, if they stay where they are in the system they live in, how they can ever get ahead. And you've given a very practical way forward and it's a massive success. Did you ever think it'd be this big and do so much?
Well, honestly, I thought many years ago when I started out in this area, I was just volunteering for 5 years and sort of filling in spare time. But really, just the momentum grew over the years, Peter. And really what we're doing is responding to demand from Indigenous parents and families and students all around the country. And it's just really compelling to kind of keep going and keep building and keep growing as much as you can when there's so many enthusiastic youngsters and families around the country who just want the same and families who want the same for their children as I want for mine, which is great opportunities in life. And these kids are coming from over 400 communities around Australia. So we've really got a massive reach from kids in remote and very remote. Over 40% of kids come from remote and very remote areas. Another 48% are coming from regional and rural areas around Australia. So really sort of reaching out into the corners of Australia and supporting those kids who are really enthusiastic. And I think, you know, these kids are coming out of school really well educated and job ready and ready for the challenges that life has got for them. But they're certainly not coming into school or selected on the basis of high academic achievement. Some of the kids, of course, are doing very well at school in the early years, but the vast majority of kids are coming in and really what's the driving factor is their enthusiasm for an opportunity and that yearning for something more in life than they can get in their own home community, without criticising those home communities at all. But they're just aware that if they go outside and stretch themselves, open their eyes to the world, and more opportunities present themselves to them, and they're grabbing that with both hands. And you know, we're achieving fantastic results because of those students going to such fantastic schools.
Yeah, and look, I know you're not talking down those local communities either, nor am I. I grew up in a country town. I'm not Indigenous, obviously, but I grew up in a small country town. So I'm alive to the challenges that country towns, country schools, smaller environments have educating kids. And, you know, I was lucky that I had family in Melbourne, so we went to the capital city and your eyes get opened up that way. A lot of these kids will never get that chance other than through your program. Let's talk about success rates, because the one thing, you know, to throw money at a problem and not fix it, you've actually turned the corner with some of these kids. You've got phenomenal results.
Well, I think we do. So in the 12 years we've been going, we've had a success rate where we measure our annual retention and completion rate for Year 12 every year, and that's been over 90% every year, except once when it was 89.3%, so very close. But, you know, in the last year, 2019, again, 91% there in terms of the annual retention and completion of Year 12. So it's really fantastic, and I think it's just a testament to how enthusiastic these kids are, how well they are supported by their families and communities, how fantastic the teachers are at the schools they go to, and just they go into an environment where there is high expectations and they're they're pushed and they're encouraged and they're supported to really achieve great things. And, you know, like anyone moving away to school, it's not for everybody to go to boarding school. There's certainly no suggestion of that. But for those kids who are enthusiastic about the opportunity, it definitely is life-changing.
And of course, you know, make no bones about it, they go back to the boarding school at night, back to the boarding masters, and someone is interested in what they're doing. Someone's going to push them if they're slacking off. They've got a meal on the table. They've got a uniform to wear. They belong to a community that values an education. Some of these things are real challenges, as you know and I know, in these Indigenous communities. Not just those communities, migrant communities too. It can happen right around Australia, but we're talking about this issue. You've had some really good results this year. We're talking about this tonight, obviously, because your annual report's out, but 97% in terms of retention for university students and a completion rate. Now, 97% for university, I think is outstanding.
It's amazing. And look, you know, when you complete university, whether you're, you know, we all talk about the gaps in Indigenous education and opportunities between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians. But for those Indigenous Australians completing university, there really is very little gap between Australian and Indigenous Australians and broader Australian community of people who complete university. And these kids, again, so, you know, not only are we having a 97% success rate last year in terms of retention and completion at university, but also we then support and monitor and sort of track those students once they do finish school or university in terms of how they're going in their careers, and we measure that every year as well. And last year, when we did our reporting on the current career destinations for all of those graduates, as you mentioned, over 700 now, again, 97% of our alumni are productively engaged in career, employment, trades and university and things like that. So not only are they doing phenomenally well at school, but they're also really transitioning into really productive lives afterwards, and frankly, just becoming incredible role models for their cousins, for their families, for their communities and their siblings and others around them. They're just really inspiring kids, young people who are doing great things with their lives. And, you know, I was on the phone for 2 hours with one of our graduates yesterday who actually featured in the clip that you were just showing, and talking to her about what she's doing and her ideas. She's got ideas. She wants to start up programs to support Indigenous education in her community up there. And it's just so inspiring to see what these young people are doing with their lives and how they're changing the nation. You know, we've got, well, as you say, 700 graduates, but another 400 a year at school. It's over 1,000
It's real. It's a real difference, right? It's a real difference. And I want to get you back, if we can, with some of your students, because I think that amplifies the point and the difference you've made in their lives. I think if anyone wants to do more or donate or get involved or read more about Andrew's program, go to his website, the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. Andrew Penfold, you're a magnificent Australian. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Always great to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
All right.